The Brood Brothers Auxilia Detachment is the only Codex Genestealer Cult detachment that lets you include Astra Militarum units, even though Astra Militarum units have been part of the Genestealer Cult Codex since 7th edition, when the Genestealer Cult had a range refresh after nearly 2 decades of neglect. There are as many ways to run this detachment as there are ways to run Imperial Guard, Massive Infantry Horde, Tank Company, Artillery Support, a Mechanized list, a Cavalry list. All of these are ways to play the Brood Brothers Auxilia, but with a maximum of 50% of your army from the Astra Militarum range, you want to pick the best units available to fulfill their role. This is about the Astra Militarum in a Genestealer Cult army. There is a different criteria for what is good compared to an Astra Militarum list of good units within the Astra Militarum because they have lots of orders and factor in the many detachments available. Genestealer Cult only have the Brood Brothers, so if an Astra Militarum unit isn't good in the Brood Brothers detachment, it isn't good for the Genestealer Cult, now that both codices are out for 10th edition. From 2 years of running this channel as my job, I have found that the best way to present this information is in a tier list. But this won't be one image. I want to explore the tactics possible with the unit, and if I rank a unit low on the tier list, what unit I would suggest that fulfills a similar role. We will cover the Codex Astra Militarum units and some Legends units. I love Legends units! You get to keep playing with the models using official Games Workshop rules, even if Games Workshop doesn't sell the models anymore. If there is a noteworthy Legends unit, I will cover it. If it's available to the Genestealer Cult, there are limitations. And hopefully the logic behind each unit I recommend or don't is clear enough for you to apply it to a similar Legends unit I don't mention, but if you want my thoughts on any particular unit I didn't cover, let me know in a comment. I will bring up the Infantry Squad. We all love the Infantry Squad. These are the models and unit composition we have seen from the earliest 40k editions to the start of 10th edition in the Astra Militarum Index. I recommend continuing to play with the Infantry Squad if you have the unit, and so I will be including it in this video. The Brood Brothers Auxilia Detachment is good as a gateway detachment to get into Genestealer Cult, if you play Astra Militarum, which I'm often going to call Imperial Guard from now on. Maybe you want to represent a sneaky regiment that infiltrates, sets up bombs, deep strikes, or uses human wave tactics. From a Genestealer Cult player perspective, it's a bit harder to justify as you are buying units from another range. Even though the Imperial Guard units have appeared in previous Genestealer Cult codexes and were available in the 10th edition index, the Genestealer Cult Codex cut out the 25% allies and made it 50% max allies, but only within this one detachment. As with the Final Day detachment needing the Tyranids Codex, you need access to the Astra Militarum unit rules to use the Brood Brothers Auxilia. This is why Legends are great. They are freely available online from Games Workshop's Warhammer community website. So today we are playing the Genestealer Cult themed around the Hive Cult. They infiltrate the Astra Militarum, the PDF, Planetary Defense Force, militia groups, and private armies of planetary governors, so they have access to the big guns that other cults can only dream of. They specialize in disciplined military tactics and performing lots of false flag incidents and friendly fire, heavy quotation marks. They use the military of a planet or country or region to overthrow it, while other cults have to fight against or sabotage the army. The Hive Cult is the army. This is one of the detachment rules, the one that applies when you're playing the game. Integrated tactics. Each time an Astra Militarum unit from your army is selected to shoot, you can select an enemy unit within 18 inches and visible to that unit. Until the end of the phase, models in that Astra Militarum unit can only target that enemy unit, and the enemy unit is caught in overlapping fire. Each time a Genestealer Cult model from your army targets the enemy unit with a ranged attack, you add 1 to the hit roll. That's okay, there are limits, of course. As it requires line of sight, it's not so great for indirect fire weapons. And because you have to put all of your shots against the one enemy unit, that's not good for tanks that may want to split fire with guns good at shooting monsters and guns better at shooting infantry. All of them have to go for the same enemy. And this is your detachment rule. You don't also get an Imperial Guard detachment rule, so you can combine this with the combined regiment. Genestealer Cults is your army, Brood Brothers Auxilia is your detachment. And the detachment rule boosts the shooting of the Genestealer Cult, which is not the best, but at least it can be made better. Boosting the Imperial Guard shooting would be ideally the one boosted to make the big tanks better, but we have to keep the Genestealer Cult as the stars of the show. This is the Genestealer Cult featuring Imperial Guard. With some limits on the units we can take, up to half of your army can be from the Imperial Guard range of units. I want you to think of two main ways to build army lists with the Brood Brothers Auxilia. Either go hard for the detachment rule, that's one way. Pair up the units. So Rough Riders support Jackal Bikers, Infantry Squads like the Kriegers support Neophytes, Scout Sentinels are great for supporting Genestealer Cult and Imperial Guard units. You have a lot of small units, and they will be supporting one another to give those Genestealer Cult units the better shots. Or the other way of doing it is you use the Guard units to cover what we are lacking as a Genestealer Cult player. It gives us great support from vehicles and relatively elite infantry with good guns. This way we care less about the detachment rule and more about having an enhanced roster. Is there a cheaper Imperial Guard unit that does the same job as a Genestealer Cult unit? So forget Jackal Bikers with Rough Riders, just have Rough Riders. I think this is the better way. Play the best units. Genestealer Cult can then be the combat side, but Brood Brothers Auxilia is the only way to have real armoured support. We get big guns. I like big guns. While I could explain the stratagems that are used within this detachment that's the only detachment currently compatible with the Astra Militarum, that is in another video about the Brood Brothers Auxilia. I want this video to be a tier list of the best Astra Militarum units to include in that detachment. The stratagems are not very good, even though they key off the Brood Brothers units, but I will mention two which factor into the unit choices for what is best. The first stratagem we're going to look at is Regimental Reinforcements. This is the exception to only Genestealer Cult units using the Cult Ambush markers. One of your Astra Militarum Infantry Regiment keyword units that was destroyed, but not artillery or characters, another copy of that unit can return by Cult Ambush on a 3+. You place a Cult Ambush marker anywhere on the battlefield, and get a copy of the dead unit in a special kind of reserves called Cult Ambush, but back at starting strength, with all their weapons reloaded because it is a totally new unit. We are limited to infantry and regiment and are restricted by Cult Ambush, where the enemy can remove the marker and the unit is still lost. It can only be used in your opponent's shooting phase or either player's fight phase, so if the unit died from an ability in the enemy charge phase, like Tank Shock, it can't be used. If the unit died while battle shocked, it can't be used on them because you can't use stratagems on battle shocked units. But if you were able to use it, the best units to use it on are Kasrkin, Krieg Engineers, and a large squad of 20 Imperial Guard Death Corps of Krieg Infantry. Symbiotic Destruction is the most useful stratagem. Symbiotic Destruction is in your shooting phase. You have one Astra Militarum unit and one Genestealer Cult unit that haven't been selected to shoot yet. They both target the same enemy unit that is visible to both of them and in range of both of them, and then models that make shooting attacks can reroll wound rolls of 1. You shoot with the Guard unit first, and then the Genestealer Cult unit will also get +1 to hit from the detachment rule. We use this stratagem for the Guard tanks. Now a Rogal Dorn rerolls all wound rolls of 1. Now a Shadowsword avoids any accidental 1s to wound with its big goodbye forever cannon. So this is a good stratagem for the big Imperial Guard tanks when paired with a small Genestealer Cult unit like 5 Acolytes, or a shot from a Sanctus Sniper or Jackal Alphas. The enhancements of the Brood Brothers Auxilia detachment can only be added to Genestealer Cult characters, so there's no need and no requirement to take an Imperial Guard character. But there is one enhancement to factor into your Imperial Guard unit choice. Marshal Espionage is 25 points. Once per turn, when a friendly Astra Militarum Infantry or Astra Militarum Mounted unit within 9 inches is selected to shoot, this enhancement can be used, and until the end of the phase, you improve the armor penetration of their ranged weapons by 1. You can make a large squad of Kriegers much better at shooting. Lots of lasgun shots without the enhancement is a lot of light that enemies can dance through with no problem. I'm sure that meme will remain relevant for a long time. Unless the benefit of cover is in play, AP -1 lasguns are good. Or we can improve the AP1 lasguns we already have. So I prefer to make Kasrkin hit even harder. Then their hotshot lasguns will be AP -2, and all the special weapons they have will get an extra point of armor penetration. With Adept Roll, you can run the numbers yourself with the weapon stats and equipment you have on your models. Figure out how much better each unit can be with the enhancement. Use Adept Roll and compare it to common enemy profiles like Imperial Guard or Space Marines. Factor in the benefit of cover and the bonuses of orders on the Kasrkin squad. I will explain why that matters a bit later. With each calculation, you can see the average number of enemies killed by each weapon, recalculate for firing by rank or for taking aim, figure out if a plasma gun is better than a melter gun, and if you need to overcharge the plasma gun for your unit to kill 5 Space Marines. Adept Roll is free to use, the link is in the description and as a pinned comment, so give it a try because it can be useful for figuring out battlefield strategies, like this one. You could have the Kasrkin come from Strategic Reserve, and then you deep strike the character that has this enhancement near to them, or also arrive from Strategic Reserves. You could have a Reductus. They're a lone operative, so they can't be shot easily, and enemies moving close to the Kasrkin will meet her bombs first. And you are pairing an Imperial Guard unit and a Genestealer Cult unit. You have the Kasrkin fire first, then you have the Reductus fire. This enhancement also works on the Heavy Weapon Squad, the Artillery Team, and the Field Ordnance Battery. They are all infantry. An extra point of armor penetration there can offset the benefit of cover that the enemy would get because you are firing indirectly. This is a nice point of armor penetration to stack with the Leman Russ Exterminator for another point of armor penetration on the Imperial Guard unit, or with a Hellhound which removes cover from the enemy, so you'll always be getting at least 1 point of armor penetration. 25 points is expensive for an enhancement, so get the most out of it. I mention these stratagems and the enhancement because they do factor into the unit choice for Imperial Guard units. Of course, if you were playing under the index rules of 25% Astra Militarum allies in any detachment, as you may want to do for fun, the real reason to play the game of course, then those stratagems and the enhancement won't matter. So now we can move on to the tier list proper with another important note. What qualities we are looking for in the Astra Militarum units. Something else by which you could judge any Legends units or units added to the Imperial Guard roster by Games Workshop in the future. We want units that can act alone and don't need orders, because we don't have them to give. They should have their own independent ability or are giving us something we lack, like heavy tanks. The detachment rule does limit the kind of units we can take. We have our own mutants, so no Auxilia, like the big mutants and the really small mutants. No characters from another religious sect, so that's the Munitorum Priest and the Tech Priest. We have our own religion we need to follow. It worships an emperor, of sorts. No epic heroes who are canonically not corrupted by the Genestealer cult, and none of the posh boys from the Ordo Perfectus like Commissars and Tempestus Scions. However, there are 2 exceptions I will show off. If you take any officers from the Imperial Guard, they lose the voice of command ability, but there is one exception to the loss of the voice of command, and we still can access the voice of command rule if applicable. You will see it on the Games Workshop app below the Cult Ambush ability. I will start with the best units for this detachment, the A tier, and because you are only able to take half your army from the Astra Militarum pool of units, you may never look beyond this top tier. But for all the units, I want to explain why I believe they are not as good, or importantly, if you have a non-A tier unit, what you can do with it, but who does it better. In A tier are the Death Corps of Krieg. Have a big blob of 20 guys. They can be made from the Brood Brothers kill team. The unit gets +1 to hit as soon as they take a single casualty, and they get +1 to wound as well when they're below half strength, so when there's 9 or fewer of them left. If you have 2 medipacks in the unit, you can heal D3 +1 models at the start of your command phase. This sounds very similar to Neophytes, but potentially with a bit more punch. Neophytes are the same cost, and probably do better, so we do need something else to boost the Krieg to make them better than the Neophytes. The unit could be even tougher with the Death Corps of Krieg Marshal that gives the unit a 5+ Feel No Pain. That unit doesn't seem to exist after the index change to the Codex, as the Forge World units were either discontinued or moved to Legends. But there is a better unit for us, because the Death Corps of Krieg Marshal gave redundant orders. We don't use orders. A Quartermaster Cadre can be added to the Death Corps of Krieg for 45 points to give the unit a 5+ Feel No Pain, and add several ablative bodies to the unit at the same time. With all of their lasgun shots and special weapons, they're a good unit to have the extra armor penetration enhancement on with a Wandering Sanctus, Kelamorph, Demo Lady, whichever one is the cheapest at the time you make your army list. But that extra point of armor penetration on lasguns can be easily swallowed up by the benefit of cover, so we need to get rid of that. The Hellhound's ability removes cover for the enemy unit. So all the units in your army, the Imperial Guard and the Genestealer Cult, they will get to ignore cover against the targeted enemy unit. That's good. Then we have a unit that supports both sides of our army. That's pretty rare. The Hellhound has very nice flamers for Overwatch and a pretty solid tank profile. I mean, Genestealer Cult and Battle Sisters will have to put some serious effort into killing it. That's what I mean by a good tank profile. Or you could have an actual big tank. The Leman Russ Battle Tank, the regular Russ. They can reroll hit rolls by themselves, and they don't need orders to do so. They reroll hit rolls of 1, and if you're attacking an enemy on an objective, you reroll all hit rolls. That's great for Overwatch when you have a big gun and reroll all hit rolls. And the unit rule doesn't just apply to the big cannon, it is all of the guns on the model. It also works in combat, it is all attacks. So without needing any support, it can reliably perform. The Demolisher Leman Russ is also a very powerful tank. You could charge it in, use tank shock, get tied up in combat, but in your following turn, you can keep firing its Blast Demolisher cannon, which is strength 14. It gives the real anti-tank punch that the Genestealer Cult need. Or we think bigger. Why get a small tank when even at 1,000 points you can have a Shadowsword? Maybe don't at 1,000 points. That's too much of our points in just the big tank. But this has a big cannon to destroy things. The biggest cannon! And you deserve the biggest and best cannon. Strength 24, AP -5, damage 12, and you get D3 +1 shots with blast. I hate enemy tanks as a Genestealer Cult player. We don't have that much that can get rid of them. This cannon does. And as part of the package, you also get 4 las cannons and 5 twin heavy bolters. If you're not focusing on supporting the Genestealer Cult and using the detachment rule, you're making up for what we lack, and nothing says good shooting like a big cannon. Focus on an enemy and reroll wound rolls of 1 with symbiotic destruction. That works on the Shadowsword. All you need is any Genestealer Cult unit. It could be a Sanctus Sniper. And that gets rid of the, oh, I rolled a 1 to wound, when you're wounding like everything on a 2+. Imperial Guard Codex armies can't usually do that. So the super heavies with the biggest guns go up in value for the Genestealer Cult. Deploying a Titanic vehicle counts as 2 deployments, a rule that's often forgotten, so you get to see more of what the enemy is putting down before you commit the rest of your army. And we're going to do some shenanigans with the Primus where we redeploy things. Not Imperial Guard units, but Genestealer Cult units. This is an Objective Control 8 tank, and unless playing with the core rules, objective marker rules, which very few people actually do, you can cover the marker almost entirely. If you are a tournament player on a very terrain-heavy board, then you may be saying, no, stop, it's too big, it won't fit. In which case, you may rank it B or C tier and prefer a Rogal Dorn. The Rogal Dorn has similar tactics to the super heavies and is tough. 18 wounds with a 2+ save and a once per game ignore an attack before finding out the damage of it. Although if you know it's flat damage 3, you know you can ignore a damage 3 attack. But if the attack was D6 damage, you would change it to 0 before finding out the dice roll. You don't get to see, oh, the first one was a 6, the second one was a 1, yeah, I'll ignore the 6. Doesn't work like that. That's still a very good ability. You can take the Oppressor Cannon with the Coaxial Autocannon and the Pulverizer Cannon for high strength, high damage. It's a good tank that can operate alone and put out a lot of firepower. And with its deck plate missing, it looks like the Genestealer Cult tunneled underneath and then cut their way inside and carried it off. The Doomhammer makes a good alternative to the Shadowsword where it matters. Against monsters and vehicles, its massive magma cannon is always considered to be in half range to make use of the Melter 6 rule. The strength of its main gun is lower than the Shadowsword and the damage is random. Despite more shots, it doesn't have the same one shot, one kill of the Shadowsword. Interestingly, it has a transport capacity for a block of, say, 20 Kriegers or 2 squads of Kasrkin. Firing deck 6 is worth using by at least 1 squad of Kasrkin, though they won't be able to scout because it's not a dedicated transport. And it can't transport Genestealer Cult models, so no neophyte block inside this tank. The Kasrkin are our elite infantry. They can be made from the Brood Brothers Kill Team unit if you so wish. At the moment, there are no rules for the Brood Brothers Kill Team in 40k. You just proxy them as one Imperial Guard unit of your choice. The set comes with a plasma gun, a grenade launcher, a sniper, a mine bomb thing, and a melter gun. All except the volley gun are represented. The Kasrkin have a special ability to give themselves orders. We explicitly can still use the Kasrkin's order even though we're not Imperial Guard. And this ability is now once per battle round at the start of any phase, not locked to the command phase. So you can go to ground when you need to, or take aim so you're hitting on a 2+. And more of those shots, especially melter gun shots, will go through the enemy when supported by a Genestealer Cult character with the extra armor penetration enhancement. This is one of the best Imperial Guard units, perhaps the only good choice for the regimental reinforcement stratagem. Krieg combat engineers have popped up as the new kids on the block, with their own 4+ armor save and semi-elite infantry roll. They give you a free grenade stratagem. Grenades is one of our core stratagems. They have a remote mine to hit a tank and do lots of mortal wounds, and they can scout, which is really valuable in crusade missions as you can score a lot of missions in the first battle round. Or in any game, complete secondary missions on objectives, which are usually 7 or 8 inches from your deployment zone in any of the game modes, so you'd usually have to advance and then you can't complete secondary missions that require actions. They're an interesting alternate choice to Kasrkin, both as a unit of 5 and as a unit of 10 for a few points more. Another unit introduced with the Imperial Guard Codex are the Krieg heavy weapons teams. They can have las cannons, twin heavy stubbers, or damage 2 flamers. I'll have the damage 2 flamers, thank you. You could outflank with this unit by putting them into strategic reserves. That way they won't get shot. They move on where they need to and shoot the enemy. When the enemy moves closer, we overwatch. And when they're killed, they get to shoot on death on a 3+. Damage 2 flamers. And they're a great way to convey the detachment rule. Small Imperial Guard units that are cheap and able to do damage are pretty rare. And the more small Guard units you have, the more Genestealer Cult units you can give the integrated tactics +1 to hit bonus to. The Catachan heavy weapons teams are also very nice. They have the anti-monster, anti-tank ability. You reroll hit rolls and wound rolls of 1 against those enemies. Great. They can scout, so they can hide if you don't get the first turn. And they can be further enhanced with Marshal espionage. Oh, and they have lasguns as well, not small arms. So you get some more shots compared to like the Cadian heavy weapons teams. Doesn't matter about the base size. No one really cares about the base size. But these are meant to be on 60mm bases, whereas the Eucadian heavy weapons teams that are sold are on 50mm bases. The Laser Destroyer battery is a nice alternative, a very good unit for spare points. It's okay at providing the detachment rule because you don't need to hit the enemy to trigger integrated tactics. It is like a 2-shot las cannon, and it comes at around half the price of a heavy weapons team that can have 3 las cannons. A cheap anti-tank gun is nice, I only hope it can hit. Otherwise, it is a unit to complete actions. The Centaur Light Carrier could do the same. At 40 points, with toughness 7, it's surprisingly difficult to kill considering its size, and it's annoying. It's a good unit to complete actions, and a good optional transport for a heavy weapons team. There is no scout from the Catachan version of the heavy weapons team because the Centaur Light Carrier is not a dedicated transport. Alternatively, you could put 5 Krieg engineers inside, keep them safe, they can throw out their grenades and use their remote mine, and the little Centaur Light Carrier can provide the detachment rule to some nearby Genestealer Cult and complete primary and secondary missions. The Scout Sentinel is a wonderful choice for supporting both sides of our army, the Imperial Guard side and the Genestealer Cult side. They spot for valuable Guard units that want to reroll hit rolls of 1. The Scout Sentinels are cheap and surprisingly tough. And of course they're good for giving the detachment bonus to the Genestealer Cult. They don't need to shoot the thing that is the target of their daring recon. At the start of the shooting phase, you nominate a target within 18 inches, that is the enemy unit that your Brood Brothers will be rerolling hit rolls of 1 against. And then, with your las cannon, probably las cannon, you can shoot something else. And then the Genestealer Cult get +1 to hit against that unit. Now the Guard and the Genestealer Cult can be boosted against 2 different targets from 1 model. And the Scout Sentinel can scout onto objectives. A wonderful unit for completing secondary missions. Last in the A tier are the Rough Riders. They have lasguns to shoot and very easily convey the detachment rule, but we're mainly taking them for the strength 9 with lance, melter lancers, hitting on a 3+. That is very good for damaging tanks. And they're versatile as they also have a frag lance. Whatever enemy you're facing, you have the tools on a big spike to deal with it. Sadly, there's no combat support for them like fixed bayonets as an order. At the time of recording, they are cheaper than the Death Riders of Krieg, even though I think their point should be the other way around. Now we move to what I consider the B tier units. They are still good choices, but if you have the points, I would choose more A tier units. Armoured Sentinels are tougher than people expect with their 2+ save. You can give them a las cannon to hunt vehicles and monsters, and they get to reroll all wound rolls against those vehicles and monsters. If you're going to fire more mining lasers at the enemy, they're a good unit to shoot first and spot for the Genestealer Cult units. But they're not as valuable as the Scout Sentinels. The Taurox Assault Vehicle, well, the Taurox is a very Genestealer Cult looking vehicle, and it can support a Ridge Runner through the Detachment rule easily with its Scout move and very similar movement. The Scout Sentinel is a tougher vehicle that does the same thing better, and has a better unit rule, but the Tauros Assault Vehicle is an alternative. The Tauros Venator gets a mention as it has a twin-linked las cannon. As a twin-linked weapon, it can reroll wound rolls, and the unit has a special rule that lets it reroll wound rolls. Well, at least the Hunter-Killer Missile can reroll its wound roll. The Basilisk makes the earth go boom boom boom. Their special ability is slowing down the enemy movement in a game based on movement, so that's really valuable. Indirect fire doesn't work with the detachment rule, so you can't give the integrated tactics bonus when firing indirectly. And the Basilisk can't have orders in this detachment to boost them up. They also lost the heavy keyword on their big gun with the Codex, so they're going to hit on a 5+ when firing indirectly. Scout Sentinels can help with reroll hit rolls of 1, but the Daring Recon of the Scout Sentinels no longer removes the penalty to hit when firing indirectly. If you are having problems with lots of Space Marines, as bigger blocks of intercessors has become a bit more popular recently, Basilisks have a good number of shots and damage 2 to kill those Space Marines. The Armageddon-Pattern Medusa has a better gun than a Basilisk with damage 4, and the unit is cheaper. But it has the same issues as the Basilisk, and it also lacks the ability to slow down enemy units. The Earthshaker Carriage Battery has the same gun as the Basilisk, but it's cheaper than the Basilisk. It hits on a 5+, but it has the heavy keyword, so it can hit on a 4+ if it remains stationary. I don't know why you would move it. The Earthshaker Platform is the permanently stationary version, and it is the cheapest unit with the Earthshaker Cannon. Both it and the Carriage Battery have the better index version of the special rule that also reduces the advance rolls of enemy units in addition to move characteristic and charge values. If you play with Legends and have the platform, use the platform as it is the best version. The Banesword's a big tank with lots of shots at high strength. That can tackle heavy infantry and vehicles of all sizes. But the deadly demise of those vehicles is more likely to go off. I have only ever had that work against me. It is 40 points more expensive than the very similar Shadowsword. That should do the same job without it blowing up in your face. And the Banehammer is another good super heavy for taking on anything. Enough shots for Horde infantry, high damage for elite infantry. It may be my preference, but if I have a super heavy, I want a dedicated tank slayer for the big problem vehicles, and we can leave killing infantry to the rest of the army. The Banehammer also has a transport capacity. Even if you're not moving forward, you could get a guard unit inside the back and then disembark out the front, so that is a big movement jump of the length of the vehicle. The best and biggest tank is next. The Cyclops Demolition Vehicle. Oh, it's so cute. It's so thematic. We love it. It's cheap as well. And while it can't perform actions with objective control 0, it can complete secondary missions like being in table quarters and behind enemy lines from Battle Round 3 if it comes on from strategic reserves. Having remote little bomb tanks go around is so Genestealer Cult that we have to include one somewhere. So weigh up the Cyclops Demolition Vehicle and Marshal Espionage. Same points. Which one is going to help your army list the most? A little wandering lone character that can complete actions and missions is the Death Rider Commissar. They are one of the exception exploits, because they don't have the Commissar keyword. They are Death Rider Commissar, which is different. If he was meant to be a Commissar keyword unit, then like a Ballistus Dreadnought, he would have the Dreadnought keyword and Ballistus Dreadnought as separate keywords. This is just a fast, cheap man on a horse riding around with his invulnerable save completing missions. With his little commissar pistol, he can convey the detachment rule, which is one interesting way of having overlapping fields of fire when it's just one shot. But if you are including Legends units, the Centaur Light Carrier or the Rapier Laser Destroyer are better, but not as fast. The Eradicator Leman Russ Urban Warfare tank is the toughest Leman Russ tank. It had a change to its unit rule, as it used to be like the Demolisher Leman Russ, where it could still use its big gun when firing at enemies in engagement range. Now it is truly for urban warfare, and all enemy ranged attacks are -1 damage if the tank is in cover. If you are familiar with 10th edition, you are in cover basically all of the time. If you somehow found yourself without the benefit of cover, you can use the smokescreen stratagem, and then you explicitly have the benefit of cover. And now you're -1 to be hit because of stealth, -1 to the enemy's armor penetration, and -1 to their damage. It is my favourite looking of the Leman Russ tanks. It has a fun gun for smashing orc hordes with blast and ignore cover, but without orders, we need to instead take the regular Leman Russ tank, which gets to reroll hit rolls. When the points first came out in 10th edition, there were 40 points between the Eradicator and the Demolisher, but with only 5 points difference between the Eradicator and the battle tank, take the battle tank with the battle cannon. The Executioner Leman Russ tank gets +1 to hit if the enemy is below half strength, but only with its main gun. That is okay at taking out heavy infantry with damage 3, or trying to finish damaged enemy tanks. The Leman Russ battle cannon rerolls all hit rolls, and is always damage 3 without hazardous. The Executioner is a good tank, a B tier tank, but I think the Leman Russ battle tank with the battle cannon is going to be better in this detachment. The Leman Russ Exterminator. Now that is a great tank in the Imperial Guard Codex. When it shoots at an enemy with Withering Hail, it increases the armor penetration for all of the Imperial Guard units firing at the same target. That is great if your army is entirely Imperial Guard. It's good support, but we can only support a small part of our army. That is less than half of your army, because it's 50%, excluding the points for the Exterminator. That's all it will benefit. There are no bonuses to hit or rerolls coming from the datasheet. It can hurt heavy infantry because of damage 3, but remember that all of the Leman Russes can have sponsons for free. That's where you can have multi-melters that are damage D6 plus melter 2, so you're always going to do at least 3 damage if you're in half range. The Krieg Artillery Team is a new gun, but you have to compare it to the Field Artillery. The Krieg Artillery Team has toughness and wounds and a good save that means you can have them out in the open, and it will take dedicated anti-tank to bring them down. Being in the open lets you provide the detachment bonus, and the weapon you have doesn't have the penalty for indirect fire. But it can if you want to shoot at something out of line of sight. The Siege Cannon option is going to be best for damaging enemy monsters or vehicles or heavy infantry. Those are the things that we struggle with as Genestealer Cult players. The Field Battery, which looks a bit more Cadian but isn't necessarily, you could have 2 big las cannons or 2 indirect fire bombast field guns. Indirect fire and damage 2 is good for taking out infantry like orcs and heavier infantry like space marines from safety. The Field Battery is very squishy. For the cost of the las cannons, which need to be in line of sight and pointing at a tank, you should be picking a big tank for your own list if you have the points to spare. 2 Scout Sentinels with las cannons are closer in points and harder to take down. And the Field Battery won't be getting any orders from sustained hits from their unit rule. We have no orders to issue. We don't have voice of command. The Heavy Mortar Team is one of the 2 Field Ordnance Battery guns. It's the Heavy Mortar, but it's strength 6 rather than strength 7. For the cost, it is better to have 3 Catachan heavy weapons with mortars. This gun got rolled into the new Krieg Artillery Team, as did the Heavy Quad Launcher. If you're just wanting one of the guns, a Heavy Quad Launcher is the better one. However, the Heavy Quad Launcher is 2d6 blast shots. For a similar price, you can have 3 mortar teams. The Suppression Bombardment is a better unit rule ability if you're going to be using mortars, because the enemy unit you hit can be suppressed, and then they get -1 to their hit rolls until the start of your next turn. The Taurox is a great speedy transport for keeping your Kasrkin safe and then dropping them off as a rapid response vehicle. There's a problem on an objective. Send in the Taurox. Because it's a dedicated transport, the Kasrkin or Krieg engineers can scout at the start of the game with that vehicle. Alternatively, there is the Chimera. That is a little tougher than the Taurox with an extra wound and an extra point of toughness, and a slight increase in firepower. When given the choice, and depending on your collection, choose the cheapest. I include the Storm Chimera here as it's a Chimera with an autocannon turret. It functionally does the same thing. We can't use the Chimera special rule, so that is redundancy we are paying for, whereas the Taurox can advance and you can still disembark the unit inside. That's why it's a great rapid response vehicle. Moving out of the C tier, we're getting into some more niche cases where this is good, but it needs to be a Wednesday. The cheapest Leman Russ is the Vanquisher. Big cannon with one shot. A mini shadow sword if you like. It's scary for the potential it might hit. No one is going to set their tank in front of it just in case it does hit. Otherwise you can think of this Leman Russ as the cheapest plasma cannon and las cannon carrier. It can have 3 heavy flamers to kill the enemy who are probably in cover, and we have a decent overwatch because you might roll a 6 for the Vanquisher cannon, but the heavy flamers will be useful. However, remember what I said about the points limit. You can't really get another backup Leman Russ if the Vanquisher fails to perform. You can't order it to shoot better, so I recommend spending a few extra points to get a Leman Russ battle tank. It's the same kind of gun, just a little bit shorter. The Styges Destroyer Tank Hunter is an alternative to the Leman Russ Vanquisher. It gets 2 shots, and it wounds almost all vehicles in the game on a 2+, but you get no bonuses against monsters. It's a similar cost to the Leman Russ Vanquisher, but has no sponsons. It's a good use of the Symbiotic Destruction to reroll any wound rolls of 1 because you're usually wounding on a 2+, so it's on the same level as the Vanquisher, and a Leman Russ battle tank is preferable. The Rogal Dorn Tank Commander I am putting in C, because for 25 points more to get the Commander compared to the Rogal Dorn, well, we can't use the orders, so I don't think it's worth it. You lose the once per game reduced damage to 0 and instead can reroll 1 hit, 1 wound and 1 damage roll. That is pretty good, but would you choose that over a Cyclops demolition vehicle? They also cost 25 points. I would rather have the regular Rogal Dorn and the Cyclops demolition vehicle. We are not Imperial Guard, so we can't use orders, and that is a big thing as to why people will take the Rogal Dorn Tank Commander over the regular Rogal Dorn. The Baneblade feels like a more expensive Rogal Dorn. We get very little from its special rule to provide cover. Even if your board was sparse in terrain, only Astra Militarum models can benefit. The other super heavies are better. The Arcurian Stormhammer is like the Baneblade, with the same Baneblade cannon under a different name. It is the same points as the Baneblade currently at 480 points, and it has 7 las cannons. It's better than the Baneblade, but functionally, it's in the same tier. I feel the same about the Stormsword. I like the Siege Cannon, but prefer the reliable damage of the Shadowsword's damage 12. Even though the Shadowsword has fewer shots, you are paying 55 points more to get the Stormsword. You could have a Scout Sentinel and a Shadowsword for that cost. The Concussive Wave special rule has too many requirements to be effective, and it can hurt allied units. The Macarius tank is the opposite of a Leman Russ. It wants to move onto an objective and then its ranged attacks reroll hit rolls of 1. Its weapons are very similar to a Rogal Dorn, but the Rogal Dorn is cheaper, so take the Rogal Dorn. The Macarius Omega is a better profile than a Rogal Dorn, a really good plasma cannon, but the Leman Russ Executioner is similar. The reason the Macarius Omega goes into C tier, where it may not in the Imperial Guard Codex, is its ability to operate alone. If the Omega targets the closest enemy unit, you can reroll hit rolls and wound rolls of 1. And that works on all of its weapons. Perhaps this is the Omega-verse that people keep talking about online? I don't know, I've never looked into it, so I can only assume it is appreciation for this tank. The Primaris Psyker is a useful, these are not Space Marine Primaris Psykers, it's an Imperial Guard Primaris Psyker. They can pop a 4+ invulnerable save when needed against enemy shooting. It is what the Genestealer Cult Magus should be, so that is an easy proxy. Or it is what the Benefactus special ability should be, because the Benefactus can have a 4+ invulnerable save for just itself, just once. That doesn't seem correct, but that's what the rules are, and we've gone past several balance patches since then. The Primaris Psyker is a good one to keep the Krieg blobs alive, as regardless of armor penetration, a 4+ invulnerable save against shooting is going to be better than the 5+ armor save that the Death Corps of Krieg already has. But what about the regular Infantry Squad? The Imperial Guard Infantry Squad, the most recognizable unit aside from the Leman, Russ, and maybe the Chimera. When you think of Imperial Guard holding the line, you think of the Infantry Squad. This is a squad that can have a las cannon and a plasma gun. As long as they're on an objective, even in the open, they have the benefit of cover. So they're a good objective holder if you want neophytes as your damage dealer or neophytes to sticky it and then move on. The Munitorum Servitors. For a cheap 35 points, they can provide the detachment bonus. You don't need to hit for overlapping fire to trigger. But having some plasma cannons or multi-melters is a nice idea. They hit on 6s, but with heavy you need to stay still. It gets awkward. If you have spare points, you can take them, but with objective control 0, they can't complete actions, and so other units with objective control are preferable. One final C tier unit. The Hydra is okay against flying units. You reroll hit rolls. It's twin linked, so you reroll wound rolls, and anti-fly 2+, you wound on a 2+. Lots of enemy units fly. Many transports in the Eldar and the Tau battlesuits, any unit with jump packs, all of them have fly. But the Hydra is not great generally. If we could boost its armor penetration, then it would be more valuable. Leman Russ tanks operate better, and we have to be careful what we spend points on when we can't spend our points freely and are limited to half our points on Brood Brothers allies. For 95 points, what the Hydra does well is be an annoying distraction that's difficult to take down. Very similar to the Psychophage for the Tyranids, but without the 5+ feel no pain that makes it extra difficult to take out. That is why the Hydra is in C tier rather than D tier. The Hydra platform also exists, but that is D tier. It costs the same as the Hydra, currently, so take the better mobile version. And that brings us to the D tier units. And the D tier choices are getting a bit more silly fun. But if I just left everything else here, you wouldn't know why these are silly choices. The Krieg Command Squad is D tier. You have a Lord Commissar, a Genestealer Cult Lord Commissar. It's a Commissar but doesn't have the Commissar keyword, so we can take it. There's a good reason not to, as with all the officers. You mainly take them for the orders, and secondary is their unit abilities and war gear like the Medic and the Banner. We can't use the orders, so for their points, you are better getting another squad of infantry like the Infantry Squad, more Death Corps of Krieg, or more Neophytes. A Catachan command squad can only join Catachans. Their medic brings back D3 models. For the same price, you can always have more Neophytes whose cult icon regenerates even more models. The same principles apply to the Cadian command squad. You could have 20 Cadians with a command squad, stay on an objective, and then you get D3 models back per your command phase. The banner means they're objective control 3. Because they're on an objective, they get the benefit of cover, but that combination is less effective than 20 Neophytes getting back more models with an Icon Ward who gives them a 5+ feel no pain, and we have the option to go to ground to get the benefit of cover if we wanted. The Neophytes have more weapons, the Neophytes can hit better with integrated tactics, the Cadians can't get any bonuses because of the orders, so don't bother with the Cadian command squad. The Regimental Attachés are a useful unit for the abilities you get. They have value, but because you need to add them to a command squad and the command squads are so bad for us, these are a D tier unit. The Cadian Castellan as an officer is a bit better, as they can give the Kasrkin sustained hit 1 and fall back and shoot, but we don't get the orders, which is the main reason to take them, and their points cost is halfway towards another squad of 10 Kasrkin. Orders are a big reason not to take these units. The Leman Russ Tank Commander is far more expensive than a Leman Russ Demolisher. They can't give orders in the Brood Brothers Auxilia, and tank commanders don't get the special rule of their tank gun of choice. So if you picked an Exterminator autocannon, you don't get the Withering Hail bonus rule. If you picked the battle cannon, you don't get to reroll hit rolls. The only benefit is death befitting an officer. That's fun to die for the Patriarch and fire one last time, but if you die while in engagement range, you can't fire. Big guns never tire can't be used in situations where it is like your shooting phase. Out of phase rule says you can't use it. so you may never die in a manner befitting an Imperial officer. With the Hellhammer, we have some more awkwardness with the Big Guns Never Tire rule. Its special rule means that when you're using Big Guns Never Tire, you don't suffer the hit penalty. But its best weapons have Blast, so it can't fire that at point blank at the enemy in engagement range as per the Blast rule. So it would have to shoot them elsewhere, and they would still be at -1 to hit. It's a low damage 2 main gun. If you're taking a super heavy, take any of the other super heavies, but maybe not the Stormlord. This is a big tank with a mega bolter from a Titan strapped to the front. While it is fun to roll that many dice, we want big guns on big tanks to get rid of enemy big tanks. If you want to play with the big gun, it is much cheaper to have the Macarius Vulcan. It's the same big cannon, but with 4 fewer shots. And its ability means that you don't have the hit penalty for firing while in engagement range. That will apply to all of its weapons. On the Stormlord, the special rule to have a Brood Brothers unit get inside at the end of the enemy turn is cute, and that transport capacity is enough to carry the other 500 points of Brood Brothers inside of it in a 2000 point game, but we don't need transport capacity. Transport capacity is a nice addition on the Banehammer, but that's a bonus on top of the big gun. We aren't seeking out transport capacity of that size. Choose a Taurox or a Chimera if you want transports. The Cadians are similar points to the Neophytes, and the Neophytes have pistols, have more special weapons, can use Cult Ambush without spending command points on regimental reinforcements, and have the same ability of sticky objectives. Choose the Neophytes, don't bother with the Cadians. If you have the Brood Brothers kill team which is built out of the Cadian squad, I recommend using them as Kasrkin or as Death Korps of Krieg instead. Catachans are the third unit. No, the fourth unit, because we keep the Infantry Squad. The Catachans are cheap scouts, but Catachan heavy weapon teams can still scout. Catachans are objective control too, but are the same cost as Neophytes with fewer weapon options. Another squad option is the Death Korps Grenadier Squad, not to be confused with the Death Korps of Krieg Engineer Squad. The Grenadier Squad was a Forge World made unit that continues to have rules in this edition, though I doubt that will continue into next edition unless the Legends rules are just not updated. The Grenadier Squad is closer to the Kasrkin than the Engineers with their hotshot lasguns, but that is where the similarity ends, as the Kasrkin can have more special weapons and can issue orders to themselves. They are the same points cost, currently at 110 points. The Kasrkin are better, unless you want a Krieg theme, but then I would recommend the new Engineers unit. The Cadian weapon team is basically a worse version of the Catachan weapon team. The Cadian heavy weapon team special ability is to have better overwatch, but there's not a lot of shots to benefit. A team with mortars can sit on the home objective, but so could Catachan weapon teams with mortars, and they get to reroll hit rolls and wound rolls of 1 against vehicles. That can include light vehicles, like the Toughness 5 Tau battlesuits that will not like being hit by mortars. The Wyvern is an okay alternative to mortar weapon teams. It doesn't have heavy, so it's going to hit on a 5+ if firing indirectly. It's only good against enemy infantry, and you know what else is good at killing enemy light infantry? I'm gesturing to the Genestealer Cult Codex generally. Between the hand flamers, the autoguns, claws of all shapes and sizes, we can handle light infantry. We don't need support from elsewhere. If you wanted that same suppression special rule, the heavy quad mortar is half the price. There are a few other light vehicles that we may want to consider, but not really. The Elysian Drop Sentinel is a sentinel that drops in. Its rules currently are left at a 3-inch deep strike, whereas almost all other units everywhere in every army book, codex, index and everything else has been changed to 6 inches, but Games Workshop rarely ever updates legends, points or units. Other than the idea of a tunneling Genestealer Cult Sentinel, it doesn't do anything that the other Sentinels don't do better and doesn't have Scout or the Armoured Sentinel ability. The Astra Militarum Codex variants are cheaper. The Sentinel Powerlifter gets Ripley on the same side as the aliens. It costs the same as a Scout Sentinel, has a pretty poor combat weapon, and can't shoot, so it can't give you any benefit from the Brood Brothers Detachment rule. A Scout Sentinel is better by all metrics that matter. If you want to heal some tanks, we can't have a Tech Priest Engine Seer, but we can have a Trojan support vehicle. For 80 points, it heals tanks. It's really our only alternative to the Tech Priest. although the Atlas recovery vehicle is the same points and technically can stack the healing between the two of them. It depends which one you want for when you want the healing to occur, the command phase or the movement phase. The Trojan also gives the tank reroll hit rolls of 1, great for lots of shots from a big tank, but because of the points cost of this support vehicle, so many other units are better. It can be annoying to get rid of because of its own defensive profile while it completes actions after the movement phase, but enemies don't need to be bothered by it unless they completely lack for anti-tank weapons, or if half of your army are vehicles. Going into some bigger vehicles, the Malkador tanks have become more popular recently after the Horus Heresy range reintroduced them as the bulky relics of the past, museum pieces now being rolled into battle, or for those worlds that haven't been blessed with the knowledge of the Leman Russ STC. And the Leman Russ is the tank to compare it to, like with the Macarius. The 4 Malkador tanks, the Malkador, the Annihilator, the Infernus and the Defender, all have a Leman Russ profile with a few more wounds and an OC of 5 instead of 3. I don't think their points warrant taking them over a Leman Russ, and they compare badly to a Rogal Dorn in points. The Rogal Dorn has the same number of wounds and OC, but is toughness 12 instead of 11. The Rogal Dorn also has more guns. I considered putting the Malkador tanks in C tier, but the only one that could be is the Malkador Defender. Overwatch with a Demolisher cannon and 7 heavy bolters hitting on a 5+ is great when Overwatch is a key stratagem used in the Brood Brothers Detachment. The counterpoint to that and why I ended up in D tier is the increased cost of 310 points, far more than a Rogal Dorn. The Malkador is a cool tank if you have one, but you may prefer using it to represent a Leman Russ or Rogal Dorn tank, weapons dependent. The Macarius Vanquisher gives you 1 Vanquisher cannon shot like the Leman Russ Vanquisher, but with heavy and reroll to hit against monsters and vehicles. Okay, on a similar level is the Valdor with 2 shots from its neutron laser and rerolling the damage against monsters and vehicles. But for the cost in points, that is nearly 2 Leman Russ Vanquishers, and those tanks can have sponsons. Overall, more guns. I don't know if I need to say this, but 2 tanks are better than 1. The Stormblade is a legend super heavy with a big plasma gun, and that gun can reroll hit rolls if you are within half range. That is one of the traits we look for in a Brood Brothers unit, but I have problems with it that stop it being ranked higher. You might get 4 shots, and even with rerolls, that averages 3 hits. It can be damage 4, but damage 3 is usually high enough, and we have that with the Leman Russ Executioner. If the lower strength and damage is a deciding factor, know that you can get 2 Executioners and change for the cost of a Stormblade, and I think I just mentioned something about how 2 tanks compare to 1. The Death Riders of Krieg are lacking the melter tip of the Rough Riders Hunting Lance. The Death Riders of Krieg are best at fighting enemy infantry, which the Genestealer Cult do anyway, but they are nice as a fun conversion project for them. You can't tell me that those aren't Genestealer Cult infected horses. The claws and the baldness are a big giveaway that the Inquisition has not noticed yet. If anything, I would use these models under the Attilan Rough Rider rules. Not many people know the difference between cavalry and slightly different but basically the same cavalry. I think it is generally accepted that the Punisher Leman Russ is the worst of the Leman Russ variants. It's a nice defensive profile and support guns like las cannons and multi-melters, but we get all of them on the other Leman Russ tanks. The Punisher Gatling Cannon is a gun dedicated to anti-infantry, and that's not what this army needs. The Manticore has big missiles. It doesn't shoot only 4 times per game as was its rule in previous editions. It has an okay profile to kill enemy heavy infantry with damage 3 and anti-infantry 2+, but only d6 shots and hitting on a 5+, if firing indirectly. We don't have any orders to boost that up. The Field Ordnance Battery or the Krieg Siege Gun will be better and far cheaper. And unusually, so is the Manticore platform. Its Storm Eagle rockets are better than the Storm Eagle rockets of the Manticore. It is strength 10 instead of strength 7. It doesn't have anti-infantry 2+, but unless the enemy is toughness 6, you are going to wound those infantry on a 2+, and you will wound light vehicles and monsters easier than with the regular on-tracks Manticore. And with a Furious Barrage, if you are attacking an enemy unit with 5 or more models, not only are you getting the benefit of blast, you get to reroll all hit rolls. So if you want a Manticore, don't take a Manticore. Take the Manticore platform. If you want a bigger missile, the Deathstrike missile. That's fun. That is like, oh yeah, the Genestealer cult have taken the nuclear weapons. You point it at a place, and then the turn later, you can either move the place it's pointing at, or you can set off the missile and shoot it. That can clear out enemies stacked up in one place and send them scattering, but if aimed at an objective, your units that go and take it will get blown up if you fire the Deathstrike. Friendly fire is on. The last big gun is the Colossus. I assume it is a victim of rules being missed and never getting fixed. It has a siege mortar, but it isn't indirect. It is such an odd profile, a few shots, low strength for a tank-mounted cannon, but with good damage, and anti-monster and anti-vehicle, but only when stationary. This unit confuses me more than anything, and like with many rules in 40k, if it confuses me, I ignore it, and usually everything is fine. So the Aegis defense line, you don't pay 145 points for a line of barricades that doesn't do much. Better to have 20 neophytes. And then the weird one, the Taurox Prime. Technically, we can take it, but the Taurox Prime can only carry Tempestus Scions or characters. As a dedicated transport, it will explode at deployment if there is no unit starting within it, so you can add a Primaris Psyker, put the Psyker inside it by themselves to stop that. But wasn't that quite a waste of points compared to a regular Taurox or anything else? That was a lot of units, once you include legends, and I like to include legends because they are official rules and I want you to be aware of fun unit options for your army, even though no one would blame me for skipping over these models. So would you be interested in buying some of these models? You've come this far, so I guess you are at least that interested. You can buy the Imperial Guard Codex if you wished, and all of these are cheaper through my affiliates linked in the description. Using these links helps me to keep doing these videos, especially the really long ones with incredibly detailed tactics on detachments that very few people consider. Your money is appreciated, and you get models by doing it this way. Or there's Ko-fi, which is just money to me. Both is an option. You could now watch the video where I explain in great detail why Legends units should not be neglected, or look at the Genestealer Cult side of the Brood Brothers Auxilia, which comes with army lists covering what you have watched here. Feel free to skip to that part if you like. Whatever you do, have a great day of 40k.